podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our Quick Publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to the Midfield podcast from Anfield Index Pro. As always, I'm your host, Alan O'Donoghue, and I'm joined by my partner in crime, Dr. Andrew Vincent. Andrew, how are you today?
I'm excited. It's not just the two of us. You're probably excited too, because that means you don't have to just listen to me for however long we record.
Exactly. We've had somebody sneak into the room. Mr. Simon Brundish, welcome to the Midfield podcast. How are you doing today?
Hey boys, I'm very well, thank you. I'm quite excited for this. I also, I don't know how much you follow my life, but I was just in Ireland over the weekend doing a podcast presenting on academy development programs. So
I did see the photographs in you in a very nicely oversized GAA jersey that I'm sure Mark some great photos. Did it go well?
Yeah, it was good. It was good. I happened to be there with the basically the best sprint coach in the world doing a sprinting masterclass at the same time. So I was just hanging on the coattails.
It's always the best place to be, isn't it? Because if things go south, you're not the main culprit either.
Exactly.
I haven't spoken to Marty in a while. I hope he's keeping well. He's certainly flying through the ranks with the GAA anyway.
Yeah, he's having a great life. You should see his pop up and see his facilities. Unbelievable,
really. I'd love to get up one of the days. Actually, I must give him a shout. So, gentlemen, today we're going to talk about development within sport and kind of looking at the youth side of things and how that can progress as we build young elite athletes. And what we hope is that the listeners will find this interesting, but also looking at how they maybe can support their own kids to whatever level without putting them under tons and tons of pressure to go, okay, I've just heard this on a podcast, so this is what you have to do now, or else you're out the door. And I know you're only 12, but that's just the way it rolls in this house. So we hope you'll get some interesting kind of anecdotes and information as we go along. But I suppose kind of to kick things off, like both of you work with young athletes. I do a little bit myself, but you probably work more with them more regularly. And I suppose, Simon, I'll come to you first. In your experience of the physical development of a young athlete, what are the elements that you're looking for, and how would you be taking someone who's maybe 12, 13, showing a bit of, potential for moving into the elite realm? What would you be doing with them on a physical level to help them develop at that stage?
So my philosophy, I like to be driven by philosophy, which kind of guides all decision making, is firstly, which would greatly, I'm allowed to swear, which will greatly piss off what we call technical coaches, the football, GAA, cricket, whoever we're at, the club I'm working for, will piss them off greatly. But my philosophy is to minimum standard, remove the physical impediment of the child, which would prevent them from playing netball, football, tennis with their mates on a Friday night when they're 25 before they go out and get pissed. If we can do that, we then start to expand their what we call toolbox of movement to make them the most physically efficient movers as possible. So we kind of look at it like a movement vocabulary, trying to extend lots of words and then teach how to build those words into sentences, and then those sentences into paragraphs, and then start building a story. And the story is the football or the actual game, the sport, but we want them to be really efficient at controlling their body from their toes to the fingertips in all directions at all speeds, and for it to become subconscious movements so that they can think about the sport and then solve the movement problems with solutions that they've already rehearsed many, many, many times.
Yeah, really interesting. I can't remember if it was you I heard years ago saying, or it was somebody else saying, that basically every child from the day dot should be taught gymnastics. It's like the best thing.
Yeah, well, I think that, let's say, taught the skills of gymnastics. If we could separate the skills of gymnastics away from the child abuse of gymnastics clubs,
yeah,
that would be brilliant.
That's always what we'd advocate for as well.
But yeah, I think I've been saying this for 18 years, and bit by bit, particularly over the last 5 years, the world is waking up to the actual child abuse of gymnastics clubs, which I wasn't actually talking about, but the way that they, from a psychological perspective, they harass at one end of the continuum down to absolutely abuse psychologically, and then physically without hitting, just with the volume of their coaching, the kids get abused. So yeah, the skills of gymnastics are without doubt the best of any sport, because they are the ones that's most movement based. And my philosophy is for you to develop the skills that you can control your own body in all movements, all directions, at all speeds.
Yeah, which is a skill for life. Andrew, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, well, I'm actually curious first, Si, like you mentioned, removing the impediments first. Can you say more about that and like what you mean there? Like, you talked about, yeah.
So some kids will have hit a very simple example. We run kids LTAD, long-term athletic development program, Strength Lab Superheroes across schools, right across primary age kids, so 5 to 12. It runs with Olympians, but 5 to 12 across the world, and it's a progressive movement syllabus, and it starts easy, gets harder, and each of the skills they learn, you can get up to 5 stars for competence. It's competency driven, it's mastery driven, rather than volume or speed or anything. It's about then developing complexity, but mastery of each of those things. One of the strands would be like core strength. Is easily enough to recognize, to understand. And when we started the program 8 years ago, the first kids on first exposure to some of these skills. So let's just go with a plank. The kids, 5-year-olds, the average 5-year-old planking time was 43 seconds. Not bad.
Yep.
If you try to do that 43 seconds, like there's going to be difference in terms of tolerance for the pair of you, but let's see. So 5 years ago, that dropped down to 27 seconds. This year is 5 seconds. What? The average kid is dropping down after 5 seconds.
Wow.
So that is a physical impediment, not being able to control your core. So my mind was blown from coaching superheroes in kids that I had one kid in a class that literally couldn't figure a way of connecting his brain to the part of his body that lifted his butt in the air off the floor. So if you think you're lying flat, put your arms down on the floor, either way, and you're lifting your chest off the floor, and then at some point, you have to lift your belly up. They just couldn't figure out how to do it. And if you can't connect those neurological processes, you can't connect your brain to your hips, to your abs, through your spine, that's a huge physical impediment, because you're not going to be able to do that in a really, really closed, simple skill. You can't be expected to do that in a very open, chaotic, complex skill. So, yeah, that's what we're doing. We're trying to stand on one leg for 10 seconds without falling over. So physical, we do ongoing. There are physical competency assessments that go around, and they're all based on, can you balance, can you jump, can you run, all of these things. But I'm doing movement physical competency assessments just through superheroes. How many stars are you getting for each of these skills? Can you balance on? Can you hold yourself on 4 points on 2 hands, 2 feet? Can you hold yourself on 3 points? If not, you've got a physical impediment of the cross sling, as I would talk about to athletes. But we need to look at why and how to fix that. Can you run in a straight line? Many kids cannot just follow a simple line that's on the playground without moving off, without veering off. Physical impediment. Can you jump in the air? Can you then land that jump without falling over? These very simple physical impediments, which are going to prevent them from hitting the ceiling in any skill-based sport from beyond that. Does that kind of make sense?
Definitely.
Yeah.
There will be greater ones than that, like fitness. The things you would see as fitness. So a VO2 max, an inability to repeat sprints, which is probably the single biggest metabolic physical analog for output in an actual sport, being able to repeat sprints. So there'll be physical impediments that they'll face as they go along relative to the demands of the game. But they're things that I wouldn't even focus on early on. It would just be, can you move your body in all speeds, all directions? That's it.
And Andrew, I suppose if you were working with, if we take child A, so Simon's working with this kid in this way, making sure those movements and the ability to move is there. Parallel to that, how would you approach managing them from a psychological perspective without calling it a psychological perspective?
I mean, like, I think I had written some notes down of just maybe not competencies in the same way, because sports psychology tends to be not that formulated quite yet. Like, we're not in a place of sports psychology where we've gotten to really core competencies of what everyone is doing, but there's some commonalities. The things that first, just developmentally, how ready a kid is to be talking to me or working on the psychological side. Like, the difference between 2 10-year-olds can be dramatic. The difference between 2 12-year-olds can be dramatic in terms of how comfortable they are talking, how in tune they are with what's going on for them, like noticing their own thoughts or recognizing their own thoughts or hearing some sort of internal voice, the extent to which they can really recognize physiological feelings as certain emotions and be able to communicate about those emotions and what they are. And then it really just depends on, what's the age group we're talking about. And actually, I find that typically, like a metaphor that's going to work for 10-year-olds is also going to work well for like adults too. Like but like those would be the things that I'm starting with, is just how prepared is this person to be able to recognize their own psychology and their own emotional state, and then be able to talk about it. That's a precursor to being able to work on it, is, do I know what's going on in here? So that would be one of the first things. Then one of the second things is, whenever you're working with psychology, you're working with, person and environment. And so being aware of, like, how has their environment set them up for failure, which, like, inevitably there's certain ways where it almost always has, and especially in sport, because you get so many of these, don't pat yourself on the back, compliments will make you complacent, be your own biggest critic. There's like a million of these things that we could find over and over that basically reinforce this idea that what's important for you to pay attention to is your failures, and to push yourself with your failures, and what's important for you to ignore is your successes. And that if you pay too much attention to those, you're going to get soft, and then eventually your career will be ruined. And then depending on how deeply that's been ingrained and reinforced by either parents or coaches who only harp on failures, or don't really acknowledge successes, or, the millions of other psychologically unhealthy things that we can pick up, especially from an emotional context, right? Like, what's a valid emotion to show? What's a valid emotion to have? What's comfortable? What can you not show other people? And how does that affect you? And so those are kind of the two things, is like, how do you get in tune with yourself? And then how do you push through the noise around you enough or start to challenge some of these external messages enough that you can speak honestly about your experience? And so one of the examples, like especially high school boys, one of the first things that we're always talking about is when they make a mistake, being performative in their anger is very important. And sometimes it's for them, but often it's for the people around them. So it's like they want to show that they're mad at themselves so that everyone else knows they're taking this seriously. The emotional skill they're missing is healthy embarrassment. Making a mistake is embarrassing, maybe disappointing. Maybe you are frustrated with yourself in some capacity, right? But because to say, hey, yeah, that was embarrassing and move on, it's very difficult. That's not like,
I don't need a VPN. I've got nothing to hide. Ha. This is what I used to tell myself before I hooked up with LibertyShield.com. Not only is my home internet now fully encrypted, but I can now access all the websites I want, whenever I want, and do so from absolutely anywhere. As a Liverpool fan, I love to know I can now watch every match, regardless of whether it's on UK TV or not. My Liberty Shield VPN makes sure nothing is blocked and guarantees me super fast streaming speed throughout that match. You can get connected right now with their software package, which includes a 48-hour no-obligation free trial and instant access to their apps for Apple, Android, Fire TV, PC, Mac and Android TV. Or go a step further like I have and get one of their pre-configured VPN routers. These small but powerful devices allow you to easily connect every device in your home to VPN, making it the perfect solution for smart TVs, Mac boxes and games consoles. Visit LibertyShield.com today and use coupon code AIVPN25 to get 25% off at checkout.
Because that's very difficult, they get stuck and then it just comes out as anger and anger towards themselves, which ultimately makes performance more difficult and reinforces the cycle of criticism. So this has gone on in kind of a rambling way, but that would be my starting spot. And then you just have to tailor those messages so they're age appropriate. So at 5, like talking about cutting through the noise of society probably isn't the deal, but maybe being mindful of, just kind of plugging in the right messages there of like, hey, like notice one good thing and one bad thing. Or, sometimes you'll have this like rosebud thorn. Like what was the good thing from your practice today? What was the thing that you're working on growing? What was the thorn, like the thing that's hard, right? And so it's, kids can engage in that. Or with emotions, talking about what kind of box of crayons do you have? And I like this for adults too. It's like, I don't know what restaurants on your side of the pond if they give kids like a couple of crayons and some coloring paper when you get to a restaurant, right? But they give you like 3 crayons. And I think sometimes even for adults, that's all we have, right? Is I can get mad, I can be happy, and then I sort of have anxious. Or, do you have a neatly organized 8-pack of crayons where there's a few different emotions you recognize and express, and that's good? Do you have a 64-pack that's all over the place, that's like nothing's where it needs to be, and you can't really figure out what color is what, and it's like you just feel a lot at different times. And so using the box of crayons metaphor might also be a good way to start getting people just aware of what am I feeling, how do I name it, and then how do I talk about it and express it.
Very good. You should do this as a professional, Andrew. I suppose I'll jump in and give my experience of working with that kind of age group, because I suppose that's where a lot of the work would start, at that kind of 10, 11, 12 age. And for me, I would usually provide young people with a toolbox of practical things that they can do that are very much age appropriate. But I will also be talking to the parents as well, because the environment is absolutely massive in this respect. Because a lot of the times with young people, we will work with them and we'll see them for an hour to maybe 3 a week max. Now, some you might see them more, but generally at that age, that's what you're seeing them. If they're going home and they're getting into the car after training or after a match, and a parent is going, "Oh, you should have done this better. You did this wrong. This isn't going to work out. You're not going to become a professional if you just don't do X, Y, and Z." And the kid had actually come off the pitch and gone, "I'm really happy how I played today. I put in a great tackle and I won the ball." or I put a great pass through, and they have kind of forgotten all the mistakes that they make because kids are great at living in the moment. It's actually the parents who make them start to question and look back. And look, I'm not pointing the fingers at any parents. I've had to have this conversation with myself when it comes to my own daughter. It's like, let her get into the car, shut the fuck up, don't give any advice. And she has told me to shut the fuck up as well. So that's okay too. Right? But it is about looking at how they can manage that balance, but also what's driving them. So I've had kids come to me where parents are sending them because their kid is so good, like they are head and shoulders above everybody else in the team, and they just abuse all their teammates. You are shit. You're holding me back. Fucking, I can't believe you make that. And some coaches will manage that really, really well. Other coaches might back the player up. Yeah, he's doing or she's doing brilliant, and you lot are not stepping up to the plate. But that's not breeding a self-evaluation for the young person. And that's where I want them to get to, how they are managing and reacting to what's going on around them. So if I'm pointing the finger at you two and go, this was the worst pod ever because you two were shit, the advice you gave was shit, well, then I'm taking no responsibility for myself. And I think as a society, we teach people to not take responsibility for themselves. You know, it has to be somebody else's fault. So that's where we ring the school and go, I can't believe my child only got a 78 in this test. That's your fault. Instead of going to the child, well, maybe it was you. You know what I mean? So we're not creating an environment for these people to be able to critically analyze themselves. And as they go through the elite process, they are going to get more and more criticism and less wiggle room from those people making decisions. So if Simon Brundish walks into the Liverpool Academy as a 17-year-old and starts calling everybody else shit, the chances are Simon Brundish is not going to be playing at that Liverpool Academy for too long unless he is an exceptional talent. And even then, there's always going to be a marker against the name. So it's about trying to teach the young person to take responsibility while understanding that they are only a child.
And then two of the things that I've written down here is self-evaluation and healthy accountability. And I think that healthy accountability becomes so difficult because you have these two extremes of either I'm totally not taking responsibility at all, or I'm so hard on myself that I'm undermining myself. And so, like, if I've made a mistake, I beat myself up so much for that mistake that it limits my ability to function. It's hard for me to be resilient past that criticism that I give myself. And so that healthy accountability of what does that look like to be able to recognize, hey, I've made a mistake, but also hold whatever that emotion is and be able to keep yourself moving forward without tanking yourself or totally changing what you're doing because you're being so hard on yourself about that mistake. And I think, one of the things you said before is like there's an age, like once you become a teenager, I think it's possible at that moment to start challenging your parents a lot more. And so like if you're a kid there and your parents are super tough on you, that's probably the age where you can start to recognize, hey, this is their stuff and I need to handle it differently. Prior to that, it's very difficult for kids to be able to recognize that this isn't just the truth. And so I think for parents to recognize what you say to your kid or the way you treat your child around sport will become the voice in their head. So if you want them to talk to themselves in ways that are kind or compassionate or even just have some healthy accountability, like you have to model that, because otherwise the way you talk to them about their performance becomes the way they talk to themselves about performance.
And Simon, from your experience, do you find it's harder to deal with the parents than the young people?
Yeah. It depends which setting we're talking about here. If we're talking what the world would, well, I don't even know if what the sport would see as elite. I don't believe there's anything elite about any kid's development. It's just development. Elite is what Messi does.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can pretend, as most clubs do, to have an elite academy. It's bullshit. And most of the time, it's students and first or second jobs in an industry coaching this stuff, because it's the bottom rung of the path. So these are the least experienced coaches you'll have, the coaches with the least skill you'll have in the club, and it's an absolute shit show of an industry setting up this way, rather than admitting that there are specialists, there are different skills required with coaching 12, 13, 14-year-olds than there are with adults. So we're reliant on coaches, technical coaches, who see more of these kids than anybody else. We're reliant on them having some kind of emotional development and some real emotional skill sets, and being cognitively aware and emotionally aware of how kids behave. And that's just not my experience of the situation at all. So yes, in schools, I see parents being the biggest problem. In academies, I see parents being a big problem, but the biggest problem is the biggest influence on the kid, which is the coaches. So how we set up is that we have annual workshops with both parents and coaches to set standards, to talk about these key performance indicators, and here are some skills that are making you accountable for this year. And if you behave this way around your kid, there are some absolute yeses and absolute nos of how you're allowed to behave around your kid. Such as they're not allowed to speak about the game for an hour afterwards. You're not allowed to talk about the game on the journey home. Like real basic principles, because one, you're judging your kid on something that you literally don't know about. So what might be your experience of how you perceive the game to be? What you don't know, because you're not that kid making those choices from inside the pitch. But also, you've no idea what the coach told him to do. So it's flawed. It's a flawed argument in the first place. So just remove that out of the situation. And from a coach's perspective, you're relying on these child coaches to understand the emotions of kids. And you need to create my feeling is you need to create a framework for the coaches of the languages that they're allowed to use, so they set a culture around the kids. So you need you need to approach it from two different perspectives. And my experience, without being a psychologist at all, is that you change behavior through the adults around the kids, not through the kids. So that you can influence how they treat each other if you can empower the parents and the coaches to be more positive and selective in how they behave. And fundamentally, there's an age-old adage around coaching, is that athletes right across the board, but kids in particular, they don't care what you know until they know that you care. And once you can create individual relationships, and you have to care about them, that you can have these one-on-one conversations and group conversations. It's harder with little kids because of safeguarding, and you can't take them out of situations. It's all going to be done publicly in front of everybody, but you can still remember that kid has a reading test the next day, or that you can just check in on, and that gives you a buy-in from the kid. The kid knows that you care about them then, and then they're going to listen to what you say, but also they're going to care more about what you say. But the last thing I wanted to say on this is to touch on something Al and I were talking about before this pod began, about processes and about logic, and how they don't necessarily cross over. And I feel like this is one area they do. One of the developmental issues I have with kids, I would like to actually talk about males and females, because I feel like they're different. That'd be really interesting for you to chime in on. Is that if we can create an objective framework for success, right? So not psychological. This is, here are your KPIs to get you to the first team, and then break those down into, this is your annual IDP, individual development plan. These are the things that you have to work on this year. And each week, these are the things that will make you successful or not successful. And if you can lay them out, you don't talk about them. Kids can then achieve those or not achieve them, but it has to be an objective thing that they can see themselves. And when they start achieving them, they get actual confidence. And they can see that where they stand amongst their peers. And that's how you forge confidence in an autonomous kid that has their own views, opinions and stuff, because they know that they're good, rather than me saying the opposite of what you're talking about. Instead of creating a negative path, I actually see the opposite. I see lots of, forget the elite environment for a second. If you go to a school, all parents just say nice things to their kids all the time. They're like, oh, God, you're amazing. Oh, you ate an apple. That's amazing. You didn't scream at your parents today. Amazing. You have all these reward systems in schools whereby the naughtiest kid gets 316 X points because they didn't stab anybody today. And the 5 beautifully behaved kids get 4. So instead of having that over positive phrase, which means that kids don't believe what you say. It removes success from their parents. Their parents go, yeah, you scored today. That was amazing. That was just wonderful. And they're like, well, I don't believe you. So they can't tell when you're telling the truth about something positive. If you create a framework that they can identify it themselves and identify it in their peers, that's what creates some kind of self confidence and awareness of where they are amongst their peers.
Yeah, I think what I like about that is you're exposing them to something that mimics reality there, which is that you'll have some goals and then you will either accomplish those goals or you won't.
Which is really important. Sometimes you won't.
Exactly. And that's okay. And we don't need to protect kids from that failure because they can handle it. And especially with the support and guidance of adults around them who are recognizing that failure is part of this whole thing, and that what you do next is the part that matters, and that failing doesn't feel good. And that's part of it, right? Is like, we don't like distress, and we often don't like children's distress or kids' distress. And so when a kid has a meltdown and they're like, I hate myself, I did such a bad job, why can't I do anything right? It's easy to overreact to that and be like, whoa, like, no, like, you're great. And like, let's dial this back. Let's take the pressure off of them. And I think like, being mindful of the difference between an in the moment reaction and a long-term reaction is really important.
Hey guys, it's Eddie Gibbs from Anfield Index here. I hope you're enjoying this podcast, and I'm sorry to call time on the show before it ends. In the current climate, it's tougher than ever before to offer podcasts for free. At Anfield Index, we produce over 75 free shows every month, which I'm confident is unparalleled in the LFC sphere. Whilst we'd love to offer everything for free, the production costs now make this impossible. That said, we don't want to follow the model of other channels and lock all of our content behind a paywall. So what we've decided to do is to continue offering every show for free, but cut that offering to 30 minutes on our longer shows. So to get all of our shows in full and enjoy the best of everything we have to offer, we really hope you'll consider supporting the channel and signing up at AnfieldIndexPro.com. For about the price of 1 cup of coffee, you'll get every podcast in full with 0 ads. You'll also get access to our LFC VIP community, where you can enjoy live podcasts, engage with our podcasters, and chat with other Reds in real time. So that website again, AnfieldIndexPro.com. Join today.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.